Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Monday morning business meeting for the Cowles County Board of Commissioners. This morning, we're going to adjust the agenda a little bit to consider the opioid settlement. If David Berger is here, there he is. He just got on. So David, welcome.
Good morning.
You're on. I just introduced you.
All right, great. So back last year, I wasn't involved with it, but there was a prior opioid distributor settlement. And local governments across the country, including Washington State and local governments within our state, are all getting settlement money from these cases, even if the county didn't litigate the join in suing the opioid distributor companies. And the board last year signed on to that to participate, meaning that we will get the money. And in order to get the money, you have to sign up for a payment portal online. And then in addition to that settlement from last year, there's 5 new settlements this year that the Attorney General's office has been litigating along with a few other counties. And so those companies, I believe they're Walgreens, and I can't remember the names of them. It's Walmart, Teva, Allegren, CVS, and Walgreens. Those are the 5 new ones. And in order to participate in this one, well, in the last one, the distributor settlement, there was a memorandum of understanding, there was an allocation agreement, and a participation form. The allocation agreement being that there's a set formula that the state uses to determine how much money each local government is going to get. So in order to participate in these 5 new settlements, you don't need to sign the memorandum of understanding again, because that was already signed for the first settlement. But you do need to sign a new allocation agreement, which is I think it's substantially similar to the last one. And then there's 5 participation forms, 1 participation form for each settlement. And the gist of the participation form is essentially that you agree that it's almost like a release of liability, and that you're agreeing to be part of the settlement and take the money. You're agreeing that you're not going to file suit against the company, and that you're going to agree to use the money for solely the approved purposes in the settlement agreement. The companies were giving the money with the understanding that all money would be spent on opioid remediation. So I believe, I'm not sure exactly what you were hoping to cover today, but before you is, signing up for the payment portal, which I think is already happening. And then you've got the new contracts that need to be approved if you want to be part of this new settlement agreement, the 5 new ones.
So I believe we've already signed up for the portal, but that's not the same thing as the agreements.
Right.
Okay, and you have those forms for us to sign?
I have links to all the participation forms in the allocation agreement.
And do you have an estimate on what the total gain for the county is going to be? And do we get it at once, or is it divided out over many, many years?
I don't recall the exact number, but I believe it's divided over a number of years. I think the prior distributor settlement was, I think it was a total of 217 million. And I believe the county or the state gets half, and then local governments get half of that portion. And it's divvied out over years. I think that the 5 new ones are going to be a similar amount, similar hunk of money. And I'm not sure about the exact numbers. I've been more focusing on the legalities rather than the.
Sure. No, that's fine. We've signed up for the portal and tomorrow, I think on the agenda, we've got a budget amendment that will establish a new fund to put these restricted dollars into.
Okay.
So from that side of things, we're set to go.
Questions?
Yes.
On the prior, let me call it tranche for lack of a better word, we received 3.8 million plus or minus, and that we put in a segregated account. Is that not right?
Let's have Susan come up and join us. She's looking at.
Maybe Kathy. Yeah.
Susan, where are you? Sorry, Kathy. Kathy will be here and she's got some more information about the dollar amounts.
Yes. Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Manager. Our first year distribution is 134,000. The total is 3.7 million, but that's distributed over 17 years.
That's the previous chunk of money?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we might get twice that amount with this latest settlement of 5.
Yeah, I haven't seen those
Okay.
amounts yet.
And then for David, while I was gone, I received close to a dozen emails, and I don't. In the past, when we did the previous arrangement, I also received a dozen emails approximately over time. This one wasn't a big batch, but in the past, I didn't sign anything until I got the okay from your office.
Right.
So if you'd send me the ones that you want me to sign, I'd be glad to do so.
Okay.
I just don't want to. Yeah, it's clear
Sure.
my intent.
And I've neglected to say one thing when I was given the rundown about the settlement agreements and the contract forms. There's also this requirement for an opioid abatement council. And I've part of my barrage of emails to you trying to explain the opioid matters. I've included discussion of that, but it's basically it's part of the requirement when we signed the memorandum of understanding last year, and as part of the allocation agreement last year and the allocation agreement this year. But it's basically a little oversight entity, and it can be either something that you delegate to already created entities, something like Great Rivers Behavioral Health or an existing health department, or it can be a new entity created by an interlocal agreement. And it's basically a group of people that reviews how are the different localities in your region spending the opioid money, because we're in a region with Grays Harbor County, Pacific County, Mason County, Lewis County, our county, Thurston County. And we have our little pocket, and this entity is supposed to be making sure that all the local governments within our entity are spending the money on approved opioid purposes and whatnot. So that's part of the process that we'll have to do, is create that, and those discussions are ongoing in terms of what other counties are willing to do, and the cities of a certain size are also involved in that. But related to the contracts to sign, I don't know if I've sent I'm looking up in my email here.
So before you go there, in continuation to
Yeah.
what you just said, I've got a distinct allergy to this centralization over many of the counties. The product is expensive and the outcome is mediocre at best. Can we not have our HHS assume that responsibility?
Are you asking, do you want our local health department to assume that responsibility?
Yes.
possible if they have the capability to do it. I know that Thurston County was looking at their own equivalent of HHS doing it because their DPA seems to think that their staff has the capability and resources to do it. I haven't talked with our health department at all to know, but if you're talking about wanting to save money and have, so the part of what you're alluding to is that I believe, I can't remember if it's the allocation agreement or the MOU, but it provides that this little entity, the Opioid Abatement Council, can receive up to 10% administrative costs for, doing this oversight work. So that's money that comes out of the settlement funds. So I do understand that there's certain counties, and sounds like you're one of them, Commissioner, who are interested of reducing those fees so that more money can be spent on the opioid remediation. It's unknown how much, Great Rivers or any other entity would charge at this point, or what kind of money they're gonna ask for, but I think it is possible to have a local health department serve in that role, as long as all the other local governments in our region agree that that's what they want to do.
Right, but it's not just the money, it's the fact that we want to be in charge of our destiny as much as possible. And to suggest that we would do something illegal if it weren't for the other counties is kind of insulting in its own. So
I missed that
really
last
don't-
bit. If we want to do something, what about other counties?
For example, if we just want HHS to be the responsible administration of the funds, I do not get any warm feeling by having Mason County chime in and say, yes, but, Mason County, you do what you want to do. We'll do what we want to do. The SAO can take us to task if they like. But nevertheless, this business of a gang deciding the rules doesn't provide me anything at all, doesn't confer upon us any greater security of the proper use of the funds.
David, we have Gina James, whose hand is raised from HHS. Gina, good morning. There she is. You're muted.
Good morning. Sorry, I was getting rejoined. I just wanted to chime in as I was listening to this conversation a little bit. I was on a call last week with my counterparts from some of the other counties that are considered in our region, and there's some interest in kind of discussing what that would look like to have a county be the lead of that opioid abatement committee or council. Versus an outside organization. So I just wanted to share that there's some conversation among counties and some interest in seeing, kind of exploring what that would look like, what the responsibilities would be, and if there's a county willing to sort of be the lead on that. So I just wanted to share that.
So one of the questions that I have that's a little bit confusing for me is that some judge made the decision that there has to be this oversight council. I'm assuming he intends to have that oversight over whoever's administering the fund. So if our county department is administering the funds, can they be their own oversight?
I'm not sure what you mean by some judge made this determination.
Well, it's a legal settlement, right? So the legal settlement.
It's in a contract that the board signed last year. So we agreed to it. All the other local governments agreed to it.
Right.
Agreed to it by contract. It is part of the overall court settlement, but I wouldn't say it was a decision of the judge. It was a decision of the board along with the legislative authorities of all local governments.
So I would like to ask it in the following way then. Are the two of you interested in having our own county administer the funds, or do you want to go to
No, if we could do that, some of the initial correspondence that I received was all this whole group had to pick one entity to do that. And Thurston was looking at their department to do it. then the latest I've seen is maybe that's not true, that maybe like a Thurston and Mason could split off, or we could split off if we can do that. Yeah, I'd be
So-
interested in ours.
So what I'd like is if we're in agreement, ask our legal department, set it up so that we have control over that through our HHS. And of course, we'll always be subject to auditing and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not trying to bypass anything like that.
So what you're saying is you want Cowlitz County to be its own opioid abatement council and not be partnered with any other county, and that there would be 3 opioid abatement councils. Is that what you're saying?
Up to the last one, I don't know about the number 3. Where
Well-
did that come from?
So it might be a little tricky for that to work, because the whole thing about the opioid abatement council from the contractual agreements is that the opioid abatement council can be pretty much what anybody wants, as long as all the local governments in our region agree that that's how it's going to be. So that means Thurston, Mason, Grays Harbor, Pacific, Lewis, Thurston, us, we all have to agree, plus the big cities and all those in the counties, they all have to agree on the
If I could
structure.
interrupt you, I don't want to discuss the legal issues because I'm not going to be capable of following all the nuances. I have trouble thinking we are in the league with Thurston and Mason County. I'm perfectly happy with something that includes Wahkiakum and Lewis and whoever else of our kind of ilk are in there. But all I'm asking you is to do whatever the best you can do to push the boundary so that we retain as much control as possible.
Okay, and we will. Just because there's an oversight group doesn't mean that they get to decide what we do with our money. So the board, we're gonna keep full control over how you guys want to spend the money. That's not an issue. It's just a matter of part of the settlement agreement was that the money is going to be used for opioid remediation. And the opioid abatement council is like a check on that to make sure it's actually happening. And so they being the state set up this opioid abatement council to be it's supposed to be like a neutral oversight entity that makes sure that, so the local governments report to this council and they're like, yep, they spent everything on opioid remediation, we're good to go. And that's the end of it. And so there needs to be some entity, neutral entity oversight that's set up by the local governments that everyone agrees on.
So originally, the suggestion was that the accountable communities of health be the oversight council. That was a suggestion. And that does include the 5 counties in the Grays River Consortium, as well as Mason and Thurston. And one of the questions that I raised was, why give control over to Mason and Thurston when we've got the Great Rivers entity, which is just the counties? And so they've been looking at that, and that's certainly a possibility. But then the other idea was, if the counties can be their own oversight, then why not do
Right.
that? So if that's possible, I think that's probably our choice number 1. We would have to get Kelso and Longview to agree, I think, for our, to make it the local, but
What do you mean make it the local?
well, I mean, to set it up for Cowlitz County.
For our HHS to do it.
Yeah.
Well, you would not only have to give Kelso and Longview's permission, you'd also have to get permission of Thurston County, Olympia, Tumwater, Mason County.
Right.
You'd have to agree, you'd have to get everybody to agree that Cowlitz County is going to be its own opioid abatement council. Which I'm not,
We're counting on you, David. I'm
Yeah.
sure you can talk them into it.
well, I mean, it's,
That
It's
would
not-
also mean all the counties would be their own. I mean,
So, yeah, so theoretically, the group could agree that each county manage their own.
Theoretically, I suppose it could be that there's, 5 different opioid abatement councils, but just from my discussions with the deputy prosecutors in the other counties, I kind of doubt that that's going to happen, but it's really not my place to convince the DPAs of policy stuff. I can certainly say that this is the position of my board, but I mean, this is a policy discussion for the legislative authorities of all the counties and cities to come out, hash out an agreement. I mean, really, this is what at the end of the day, the Opioid Abatement Council, how the structure of it is a policy decision, not a legal decision. My legal advice is that you need to have one in order to get the money. If the counties and the cities can't agree on what it is, we won't get any money at all. And the exact makeup of that entity is a policy decision, which needs to be worked out by the policymakers. I'm just the lawyer, so to speak.
If I could add, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could add, one of the conversations that counties were having is, would one option be, instead of to rely on an existing organization like Great Rivers or CPAA, is for counties themselves, like the HHS departments from across the counties, to work together and develop an MOU to form our own abatement council. So it would be like the counties would come together and serve as that council. I don't know the legalities of that, but that's one of the ideas that came up in our conversations last week, was looking at that option.
So you're talking about one united entity that's made up of a representative from each health department or something like that?
Yeah, because my understanding is the council has to be represented by each county. There has to be representation from each county on that council. That's my understanding. And so that was some of the conversation.
I mean, yeah, sort of, but I believe the contract says that, like, if everyone wants to agree, so say that Wahkiakum County doesn't care at all about having any sort of, seat at the table at the Opioid Abatement Council, they can be like, yeah, we're fine with just relying on Thurston County to be our Opioid Abatement Council. We don't care. And
So David, if I may be so bold as to interrupt you again for
Sure.
the 45th time. I've watched enough TV. The job of the council is actually to try and carry out the desires of the client. So why don't we leave it that you will try and figure out how you can how within the bounds of the contract and all that, without having to discuss all those nuances here today, that you figure out what it is we can do to achieve as close as possible the desire of autonomy.
I think the closest that you'll be able to get is something like Gina described, or something similar.
Right. So I can count on you trying to put that together.
The message has definitely been received that Cowlitz County is interested in autonomy. And I will work within the bounds to do that. My ask of the commissioners would be to be negotiating with other, your counterparts in other counties and cities to make sure that everyone comes to an agreement, because I'm not the one that's going to be signing off on it. And I can talk to the other deputies, but it's not my place to talk to the other boards. But I will definitely convey that Cowlitz County wants as much autonomy as possible, and it sounds like also interested in cutting the any sort of overhead fees as much as possible.
Going back to a question do you prefer to be called Kathy or Susan?
Oh.
Yeah. So Kathy, it was my understanding several months ago, so you can say I wasn't here, that we actually had received 3.8 million, not just in paper, but actually the armored truck came by and dropped the money. That's not right. That was my misunderstanding.
Yeah, we did not receive 3.7 million. The,
Okay.
according to the payment portal, the first year distribution is 134,000.
Okay. Have we gotten that yet?
No, we have not.
Because?
We've just signed up for the portal. We've entered in our W-9 as well as our banking information for them to ACH that. So it's now, everything's available for the distribution.
And can you tell me again, what is the meaning of the portal?
The portal is something that was set up, I understand, but per the settlement. And so it is a secure site that contains information about our county, as far as like our banking information for them to disperse the funds. It also has a copy of the, I believe, the MOU embedded in it, things like that.
And that's accessible to the public?
No, it is not.
Accessible to me?
No, it is not.
Excellent. No, those are the right answers at the moment.
It is a secure portal, and then the county can make the decision on who has access to it. Every commissioner could have access to it if you would like.
No.
So I was set up as the administrator of the portal, and I can grant access to any other individual.
You
in the
just need
county.
a backup and then I'd
Yes,
leave it at that.
I don't want to be the only person, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we understand the direction we want to go with this thing.
I think so.
Yeah. Whether we can get totally there, we'll try and get as close as we can.
Right, right.
So it looks to me like there may be four options that will be worked on. One is county autonomy. That's our preferred choice. Second one is what Gina mentioned, that the counties would the county health departments would form their own oversight council. The third option was to take advantage of the existing BHOs, which are run by counties, county members of the board. And the fourth one is the accountable communities of health, which is kind of the privately owned board that was set up for some reason, including the 7 counties that are in this region.
Within each of those, there are probably nuances. Like for the top two, it's still beyond me. But my understanding is the dollars are being allocated by some formulation. So they already know what Cowlitz County would get. So then we're only squabbling about who's going to have control. I don't want to, two parts. One is control and one is supervision. And I'm not sure how they work out. But I don't want to pay somebody 10% to do something that I know our HHS can do quite adequately and has been doing for a long time. But I think one of the nuances I mentioned is why we're lumped in with Thurston and Mason. Mason, maybe Thurston, that's really hard to picture. So among other things, we can have an agreement with other counties, but not all counties is really what I'm trying to hint at.
Yeah.
Can I
Maybe
jump in there?
Did I describe the options or the different choices okay? Or did I leave something out?
No, you did good. I was a little confused about option number 4, but just to address, I'll come back to you on that, just to address what Arn said briefly, if I can. The control versus supervision issue, I don't think the control is anywhere on the table where we will retain control under how this is set up. No one's, I don't think, going to be, as long as it's for opioid remediation purposes, I don't think anyone can tell the county how to be spending the money. It's the supervision that we're sort of discussing right now, fighting about, or however you want to call it. What is the oversight supervision going to look like for how the local governments are spending the opioid remediation? And then you said You didn't want to pay 10% for something that the county can basically do itself. And I think that's fine. It's just a matter of everyone being all the local governments have to agree on that structure. And then why are we lumped in with Thurston County? It's because the state decided to. There's some, I can't remember the name for it. It's,
Accountable communities of health.
thank you, yeah. So that's already a pre-existing setup by the state where Thurston, Mason, and then all our counties all familiar with, were in that region. And then the state decided, okay, for the statewide settlement, we're gonna break off regions into 9 regions using that affordable communities of health region structure. So we're stuck with that because that's how the state decided to do it. Okay, I think I touched on your points there. And Commissioner Weber, your number 4. So the first one you said county autonomy, second one, each health department.
Would form their own.
Well, yeah, that each health department would form their own. Option number 2 is there'd be one entity with a representative from each health department, but it would be similar in that there's no administrative fees or bare minimum. Third one would be Great Rivers Behavioral Health, and then Thurston and Mason would be on their own, and there would be 2 entities. And then option number 4, I wasn't clear what that one was.
That was the accountable communities of health.
Okay. So would that be that there's just one entity with representatives from each county? And
Well, that's the problem. It doesn't have representatives from all the counties. County commissioners aren't involved at all. That's a whole separate entity.
okay. So one thing also to keep in mind is that if the local governments can't agree on the Opioid Abatement Council structure, then we won't get any money at all. The contract says you have to agree, everyone has to agree on how the Opioid Abatement Council looks like in order to get the money. So
Could you define everyone there, please?
every county from our region, so Thurston, Mason, Lewis, Wahkiakum, Cowlitz,
Grays,
Harbor, Pacific, and then the larger cities within of those counties. So Tumwater, Olympia, Kelso, Longview. I forget the other cities, but that's
Lacey's probably in there too.
Lacey's in there. Yep. So all those local governments need to agree on this is how the Opioid Abatement Council is going to look like.
Now, the previous agreement was 90%, as I recall. This is 100%.
90% of what?
90% of the people involved in receiving funds, kind of like what you just described, everyone. They did not need a unanimity. They needed some overwhelming fraction for the deal to go through. This one, it sounds like you say everybody has to participate or the deal does not go through.
Yeah, I don't know about the last one, but that's the case for this one, that everyone has to agree for 100% on the Opioid Abatement Council structure, or else we will not get any money.
Yeah, I'll just say it outright here. That seems mighty strange. It gives everybody a veto power to, anyhow.
Yeah.
And I think
And I'll be
the
glad to
drop
exercise it.
dead dates, June 5th, June 6th, somewhere around there.
I mean, it was June 8th or something.
I think it might be June 1st. Let me see if I have
Yeah,
it.
it doesn't matter.
So April 18th was the deadline to join the payment portal.
June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah, is that it? Okay. Sounds about right.
I just
So earlier this month, the Great Rivers Board of Directors, that is county commissioners, ask staff to prepare a formula, what it would look like if they offered to be the review council for the 5 counties. So we'll be hearing back from them at our next board meeting at the second Friday of April.
Okay,
They even want to do it, so. So we still have some time to discuss the best option.
yeah. So their lawyers are meeting again this Thursday afternoon. So I can give them some feedback on our discussion today.
Okay,
And then the chairman asked a question. Let me ask it again in case someone has thought through and answered that. How much money are we talking about? Any guess, anybody? This is before Las Vegas.
Kathy's back.
Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Manager. The paperwork that I received says 3.7 million just for our county, for Cowlitz County in total.
And so that includes portions that go to Longview and Kelso?
No, that's just the portion that goes to
okay.
this county, Cowlitz County.
Just the government, Cowlitz County.
Right.
Yes,
So it's pretty much equal to what was done before.
yes.
Okay, thank you. And that's also over the same pay period?
The pay period is set, David, I believe the paperwork you gave me says 17 years.
That sounds right. Is that
And
from
then,
the PowerPoint
then-
presentation?
yeah, and then I read for the 5 participation agreements, the new ones, it's 16 years.
And there's no escalation on the amount?
I'm not sure. When I went into the portal, it shows already our first year distributions 134, and it shows our second year distribution is 141,000. So I'm not sure how that works.
Right.
It's not an even, not anything even, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And some of these, if we have questions on specifics with payments and how that's working, there's a contact at the State Attorney General's office, Jeff Rupert, who is kind of the go-to guy for these kind of questions. So if something isn't making sense and you have a list of questions like, why is the money coming out this way? And if we can't answer it, then we can forward that to him.
All right. Any other questions for David?
I don't.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the time and effort you've put into it.
No problem. I'll send along the 5 participation forms and the allocation agreement number 2. Commissioner Mortensen had said earlier in the discussion, so to basically send those along and for signature. So I will do that.
We'll plan on that for our meeting next week, I guess.
Were there any other questions or concerns?
That last statement for the meeting next week.
Well, to authorize the signature of the contracts.
I think we need more time than that.
Oh,
It's fine.
I mean, depending on how things work out, at least I want to be sure that we don't sell our soul to the devil by signing too soon.
mhm.
And so
Yeah, we can take, I mean, obviously we can take more time and we're well within any deadlines for decision making. Because we got the key one done and that's the portal getting set up.
yeah,
So
so
we
just to
keep
be
in mind.
sure, we have until the end of June to sign, right?
Right.
For the, that's the deadline for the Opioid Abatement Council. I'm not sure if there was a specific deadline about the participation forms and the allocation agreement number 2. I will ask Jeff Rupert a direct question about that and say that our commissioners want more time to review the contracts and to to verify if there's a specific date by which we need to sign that, and I will pass that information along.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super, thanks. Appreciate it.
No problem. Anything else?
Don't think so for now. All right.
All right, I will head out then. Thank you.
Thank you.
We, at some point, will probably need to make a decision on how we want to spend that money. And
We-
I'll bet
got-
we'll get all kinds of
we-
suggestions.
We've got at least 15 years.
Okay, so let's go back to our regular order and report from HR. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. First item I have comes from Building and Planning. Their admin assistant 2 is transferring back to the clerk's office. That's where she was originally hired. So Building and Planning is requesting to fill her position of admin assistant 2.
Yep.
Is that okay? Okay.
All right.
Next item comes from Office of Public Defense. Their senior public defense attorney, Nicole Michael, has accepted a job over in Spokane. So they are requesting to fill her senior position.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then the last item I have is just a request for an executive session for performance of a public employee for when the meeting's over or at the end.
For how long?
10 minutes.
10. Okay.
That's everything.
All right. Thank
Thank you.
you. Appreciate that. Risk, safety and training. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Victoria Blosel, Risk and Safety Manager. So just another update on Neo Gov training platform. I have my final meeting with the consultant that's been assisting me on Wednesday this week. And then I plan to roll that out by department over the next several weeks.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
And
Just,
you'll be joining us for the executive session?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
And then I just have a couple other items.
Just out of curiosity, Howard, I haven't seen a lot of torts come by my desk. Or do we have people decide that we're not completely bad or what?
Yeah, we haven't had too much come through. Also, I will be attending the WCRP Spring Conference this week. Thursday and Friday, I will be in Tacoma doing that. And then I will be taking the first part of next week off, but will be available by phone and email for urgent issues.
Any questions? Any other questions?
What kind of things do you expect to hear at the conference?
I did not review the pamphlet yet. It's pretty large. But I will review that before I get going.
Okay, and when you get back, could we have a report?
Absolutely.
And you know, I always want something succinct, not.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy. Finance report.
Kathy Funk Baxter, Finance Manager. I'm working on monthly financial reports, and being it's my first one, I'm really going through everything and reviewing and making sure that I have explanations for any variances. So that should be coming to you, I hope, by the end of today. Also, another item that, in order to keep you informed of financial matters, I think monthly we report to you what our collections are for the month of the month of March, which would be your sales tax earned in January, is 912,000. And then last year at this time, for the same time period, it was 1,086,000, almost 1,087,000. So it's slightly down over prior year. And then for your mental health tax, the collection that we received this month will be 241,000. And the collection that was received in the prior year was 248,000. So it too is slightly down.
Do you have any feeling for normality in this?
Well, I was reading last week about the state budget, and so I'm going to be monitoring and following what they're doing and what they're forecasting. They are forecasting flat, I believe, for the rest of this year, but then they're also looking at what they're going to be doing for the next biennium. And so I'm going to be monitoring that and looking at what they're forecasting. And I would assume that we would look at that as an indication as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
At some point in the legislative session, things sort of go on pause because they wait for the economists to make their report. And that gives them the latest figure. They probably talked about that last week. Yeah. So.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So I'll be monitoring that and making sure to share that with you, any information that I get.
I think one of the things that I would look forward to is if need be, a recommendation that we take a much more conservative look at the hiring process. If we are entering into rocky waters, and it sounds like if everything is flattening out and we've negotiated pay raises, that's problematic. So we'll need to know, and we need to start cutting back on, filling all the positions that come vacant, because we have to be able to balance the budget.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things. First one, filling positions is one where we tend to think we're an egalitarian society, and we tend to think if this department has to take a 10% hit, everybody else has to take a 10% hit. But of course, that the supposition under that is that all departments are equally stressed or equally performing, and that very seldom is true. So that's just a comment. I did want to maybe, hopefully not throwing it out too soon on your behalf. You were talking to me about the suggestion on not just any contract, but just in general, if we're going to spend a chunk of money, however big that chunk might need to be defined. But it's got to have an analysis with it, not just the one-sided thing. And I much appreciate that.
Well, actually, I was going to formally bring that up. So today is the date that we've sent out for all of our departments. If they have a budget amendment, they need to be in today so that I can get the paperwork complete. And so one of the things I've been noticing is, having received a few of those, that I'd like to suggest is that most of those that are agenda items, such as a contract, et cetera, they have a section on the agenda, that item that says fiscal impact. And so I'd like to suggest that, I think the county used to do this, and I believe it's something that happened in the past, is that those with fiscal impacts would be routed to my office so that I can look at those and make sure that I'm better informed and more proactive on budget amendments. So I'm requesting that we look at that and see if that's something that we can put in as a process.
think that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It lends itself to a lot of abuse, if not. There are always assumptions that go into what the future will bring, and that I'd like a balance in the assumption. When I first came on board, I felt the board wasn't really part of the solutions to things. It was a hurdle that the departments had to climb over.
Mhm.
And that doesn't seem like, I mean, I'm more of a team guy, just lay it out on the table and let's jointly decide what the right thing is. And of course, we make the final decision, and that means it's our responsibility, but we definitely want the input as you describe.
Yeah. I think that makes total sense. Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
I said that makes sense.
So one of the, I guess the next step is, I think we've just made the decision to accept your recommendation. I think it's up to her to contact the departments to let them know that this is a new step in the procedure. Or does that need to come from our office? Or if she sends it out, it's part of our office, so.
The way I look at those things is we start the communication, and eventually we can decide whether we have to do a county ordinance or something like, or a resolution. Right now,
We'll rely on her communication to send out the word.
Okay.
Okay.
And I believe that Kim in IT told me that they're looking at automating consent agenda, not consent, agenda items in Agenda Quick. And so this might be automated as well.
yeah, that's actually a pretty good example of the one of the difficult things to evaluate on a return on investment is the intangible. How much you get from the fact that you didn't make an error by doing a manual translation. It was a electronic translation, automatic. And so this is not intended to be a put handcuffs on everybody.
But it will be an
No.
additional step in the
Yeah.
process of
Yeah.
approval, so.
And I think it would be proactive in building our budget amendments and having full information.
Great.
And
Thank you.
Well, I
That's it.
apologize for jumping ahead.
No, that's all I have to report today.
All right, I think Marin is here to give us an update on all the fun that occurred over the weekend. Nope,
There we go.
there we go.
Marin Fox, Director of Corrections. I don't have a lot to report today. Our population this morning was 217 with 37 bookings over the weekend. That's pretty much in the standard range. Last week when I spoke with you, you requested some additional information on our bookings and releases, how people are being released. I'm working with Tom Stoddard, who we have a contract with for Spillman Support on getting that report together. But I haven't received it back from him yet.
Okay,
I don't have
numbers
any-
down then this week. It was,
Right. Our bookings our releases are outpacing the bookings. Usually they're pretty close. Last month, it was flipped. So that was why our population was rising. It's the census, and when I get the report, I'll be able to give more detailed information. The courts are moving, we're seeing trials, we're seeing people get sentenced. So that's not a bad thing.
great.
When you see and I know this number jumps, so it's not always steady, but if it's continually down, then do we look? Cause I know we'll take 4 DOCs a week.
Mhm.
Well, if we're gonna have numbers down, do we look at that number and say, well, maybe we can do 5 or 6 or whatever? I mean, does that factor in to some of the stuff?
We certainly could. DOC has not been bringing us 4. So
Okay,
and we can talk to them about why, but they're not supervising as many people with the Blake decision. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors in that, but
Yeah.
they're, even with the door open to 4, they've not been, that's
I-
not been a hurdle.
I didn't know how many they're bringing. If they're
Right.
not bringing 4, it's probably a non-issue, but if
Right.
our thing is down and they're butting up against the 4, then maybe we can do 5 or whatever.
So,
okay.
so since they represent a portion of your budget, how do you make up for the fact that they're not sending us any money?
They don't,
You know, they contribute money,
revenue,
but
right?
if they're not doing it anymore, like you said, that means you're gonna be budget short. That means we're gonna be budget short, right?
Right. I mean, we're in the general fund. The jail has never, our revenues have never made up for expenditures, that they're very far apart. We're not an enterprise fund. So the jails cost money. We don't make as much money as we cost, and that's the reality of budgets.
But I think the chairman is probably is bringing up the point, because in the past you've mentioned we've had up to as many as 100 DOC inmates. And that's a lot of extra money that comes in. And that's got to be reflected somewhere in the budget.
Sure. We have not had 100 DOC inmates for
A while.
a very, very long time. Pre-COVID, I'd pull the numbers. We may have been in the 30 range, 30 DOC inmates-ish. So that number has been dropping, and that is not just due to our space, it's also due to the way they sanction, how many people they have on supervision. They've moved away from having as many of their people incarcerated on probation violations, essentially. They've made quite a few changes to how they sanction and how they use jail space. So that number statewide has come down. It's been incrementally reducing in our,
Yeah.
when I do the projections for revenue, the DOC number has been dropping. It was at one time a very substantial amount of our revenue.
Just for clarification, I did not make up that 100. That was a number you threw out sometime.
Years and years ago, right, yeah.
Well, about events some time ago. So, but I keep on hearing from constituents, any number of them, about people not being accepted into jail. Are we turning people away from the jail? And I know I ask you this every week because I keep on getting these things every week.
Right, and I mean, I've heard plenty of things from citizens that simply aren't true. We're not turning people away. You know, Safeway may choose not to, I won't, not just Safeway, Lowe's, they all have different policies about theft, third shoplifting. They have their own internal policies. We're accepting all of that. The only thing,
Okay,
as I've
so-
said before, we're not taking is driving with a suspended license, and we will if they call and
So-
have some special circumstance.
If I'm an officer and I have somebody, can I take him directly to the jail or must I call ahead of time?
No, they don't call ahead unless they need our assistance because the person's combative.
Okay, so if I as an officer bring the person in the jail, you hold them until arraignment?
We hold them until they go to court, or we hold them until a court decides what to do with them, whether that's
Okay,
a bail amount that they then make bail on, if they get, they have case dismissed or released on their personal.
and
premises.
if I call ahead of time and say that this is Officer so-and-so, I've got so-and-so I want to bring in, do you say no? Is it a
No,
different answer?
I don't know if I understand the question. They don't need to call ahead unless they want to bring somebody in on what would be like a suspended license.
A little bit of what I've heard is that there are people being turned away from the jail, and I'm trying to figure out where the discontinuity is, where the lack of communication is. So I'm wondering, it's bringing someone to the jail is different than calling up and say, hey, will you take this guy? But I think you would say, no, it's the same.
Right there, we don't have that step of needing to call and ask.
Yeah.
You know, and some of it could just be rumor and the fact that we were restricting bookings last year. I know people sometimes have conversations. And that certainly was the conversation. It was a big conversation last year, but we have incrementally moved our restrictions to essentially nothing. We're accepting on everything. So but I think, once people repeat and hear, it just kind of keeps, it has legs, whether it's,
So the
factual or not.
restrictions were more COVID related because we had people who were sick and couldn't be with other populations. So all single cells. When the plan is, or when the facility is designed for at least double cell.
Right.
And so that was the restriction. Well, that's over with now. But the rumors
Well,
persist.
some of that
But
was
the other
true.
thing is the charging decisions. I mean,
Mhm.
if the prosecutor decides there's just simply not enough evidence to really win a conviction, they'll drop the charges.
Correct.
That's not your decision. That's going to be.
That's a
prosecutor's.
different
Right.
story, right?
Judges bail, issue bail and
Well,
people
and it's-
can dispute whether they should be giving bail to folks who have criminal histories. And that, all it takes is a couple of stories like that in the news, and then people remember, well, we used to do that or something,
Sure. And COVID was not really what caused the booking restrictions, partially COVID and partially the makeup of our population and how many people we have that
Yeah.
are mentally ill and, have behavior that makes it difficult to house anyone with them. But I'm thankful that we're finding a way to make it work to accept. all
Are you
bookings.
suggesting that the mental illness issue has lessened or
No.
still
No.
pretty key
Right.
critical?
No, we're still,
You're having to deal with it.
we're having to deal with that. And Western State is still the longest wait of all time. We have one person waiting from, I think he was ordered in June of last year and he still doesn't have a bed.
I just had a brilliant idea. Why don't we buy a cargo ship, park it into
Yeah.
Columbia, make that be your new jail?
Well, it's
Probably a lot cheaper than building one.
probably, maybe, there's probably a couple
Might
things
have to
done.
dredge it so it can get up
We'll
there.
ask the director of finance to
Yeah,
pull the money
no
together.
problem.
Any other questions?
No, thanks, Maureen.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I think Kim is next.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kim Hort, IT Director. Just kind of steady progress with our contract with CHR Creative. You guys had approved that contract for services to assist the IT department, and that's going well. We've done our data center updates and working on monitoring and kind of getting our rhythm. This Friday, we do have quarterly Laserfiche server updates, so there should be communication about that outage for this Friday. We are gearing up for this Thursday to start setting up the email Fisher add-on service, which employees can, if they have a questionable email, they can click on this button that's in their Outlook to have it go through an AI assessment to determine if it's legit or if it is a phishing. So Aaron Briggs and myself are sitting on that development meeting this Thursday. So soon to come, which will also include some training and some documentation on that for all users. And a great impression from Kathy, the finance manager. I worked with her last week in regards to kind of strategizing and coming up with some planning. I think some of the ways in which we assess our IT cap, as we call it, is a little antiquated, just going off of device. So just kind of strategizing a good plan for long-term management of our funds and establishing a stronger reserve for IT. And I have been working aggressively on several contracts that are coming due this year. So there'll be some big dollar amounts, but it's just our 3-year term is coming up to date. And I'm coordinating efforts with various departments to see if we can acquire or apply for a grant with the state archives. I'm shooting for $30,000 towards building out additional storage for our digital archives. So we have vaults throughout the county that are, microfilm that's being sent off and imaged into digital form. And we just are looking to plan for that additional volume of documents that we need to store. So just seeing if we can leverage funding from that grant. And then I will be out of the office next week for spring break.
On your, and I know you've been on your contract with the phones, some of the equipment. have you been able to make any headway on that?
Yes, I pushed back. They were trying to upsell us to a higher end server, but there was no value added, but they were wanting to charge us $25,000 for that. So I pushed back saying that doesn't make any sense. We put hard dates in our proposal. You need to abide by that. And then they came back saying that the lead times have gone down and we can get the servers that were originally quoted. So
Good,
so far the lead time's been good and we're finalizing that contract with legal.
good.
Great. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Kim. Anything else under miscellaneous? And I don't think we have another executive session, not until after the next meeting. We do, 10 minutes, right? Okay, we'll meet back in the back room. We'll recess for about 10 minutes or so to discuss a review of public employee performance of a public employee. Yes. For now also. Okay. And dealing with okay, how much time? Another 10 minutes? All right. So we'll be recessing probably for at least 25 minutes, so. We'll be back in 25.
The board is extending the executive session regarding performance of a public employee for an additional 5 minutes until 11:22 a.m. The board is extending the executive session regarding potential litigation for an additional 5 minutes until 11:40 a.m. The board is extending the executive session regarding potential litigation for an additional 5 minutes until 11:47 a.m. The board is extending the executive session regarding potential litigation in additional 5 minutes until 11:52 a.m.
We have returned from our executive sessions. We did have 3 sessions and no decisions were made. Is there anything else to be brought to the board's attention? All right. Well, let's close this meeting and we have another meeting with Public Services. So first session.